The desperate call captain, Alina Rodriguez, was finishing her third cup of coffee when the universe changed forever. The communications array at Luna Station had been quiet for weeks, monitoring the usual merchant traffic and diplomatic chatter between the various alien civilizations that made up the Galactic trade network. Earth had been part of this network for only 5 years, still considered newcomers by species that had been traveling the stars for millennia. Alina stretched in her chair, watching the peaceful blue marble of Earth rotate slowly outside the station's massive viewing ports. Humanity had come so far since first contact with the Andromedans, but they were still learning their place in the vast cosmic community. Most alien races viewed humans as curious primitives who had somehow stumbled into space travel despite coming from what they called a death world. The first sign of trouble came as a faint signal bleeding through the background noise of space. Alina frowned, adjusting her headset as she tried to isolate the transmission. The signal was weak, distorted, and came from a direction that should have been empty space according to all known star charts. Computer, enhanced signal on frequency 247.8, Alina commanded, her fingers dancing across the control panel. The static cleared slightly, revealing something that made her blood run cold. It was a voice, speaking in the melodic tones of the Zephyrian language, but there was something wrong with it. The usually calm and collected Zephyrians sounded panicked, desperate. Alina's universal translator struggled to keep up with the rapid, fear-filled words. "This is Ambassador Cathara of the Zephyrian Third Fleet," the voice crackled through the speakers. "We are broadcasting on all frequencies to anyone who can hear this message. Our worlds are dying. The Void Hunters have returned from the dark spaces between galaxies, and they are consuming everything in their path." Elena's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor as she leaned forward. The Void Hunters were legends. Stories told by the oldest alien races about a terrible enemy that had vanished into deep space thousands of years ago. Most species considered them myths, cautionary tales to frighten young ones. "We have lost 17 star systems in the past month," the transmission continued, Ambassador Cathara's voice breaking with emotion. "The hegemony, the crystalline, collective, the quantum confederacy, all gone. Their fleets were destroyed, their worlds stripped bare and left as empty husks floating in space." Elena's hands shook as she began recording the transmission and preparing to send it to Earth Command. This was beyond anything humanity had ever faced. The alien civilizations mentioned by the ambassador were ancient powers with technology that made human achievements look like stone tools. "The Void Hunters adapt to every weapon we use against them," the ambassador continued. "Our energy weapons became useless after the first battle. Our kinetic projectiles were absorbed and turned against us. Our best tactical minds have tried every strategy known to galactic warfare, but nothing works. They learn too quickly, evolve too fast." There was a pause filled with static, then Cathara's voice returned, even more desperate than before. "We know that humans are new to the galaxy. We know your technology is primitive compared to ours, but we have heard stories about your people. The other races call you Deathworlders and speak of your planet with fear and wonder. They say you come from a world so dangerous that it forges its children into warriors simply by existing." Alina felt a chill run down her spine. It was true. That Earth was considered unusually hostile by galactic standards. While most inhabited worlds were stable, peaceful places where evolution had favored cooperation and tranquility, Earth was a chaotic mix of natural disasters, predators, diseases, and constant environmental challenges. Humans had evolved not just to survive, but to thrive in conditions that would kill most alien species. "Please," Ambassador Kithora's voice pleaded across the void. "If anyone receives this message, if there is anyone left in the galaxy who might stand against the Void Hunters, we beg for your help. We are sending our last remaining fleet to the Kepler 442 system. If we do not receive aid within 10 standard days, the Zephyrin Alliance will cease to exist." The transmission cut to static, leaving Alina alone with the weight of the galaxy's desperate plea. She sat in stunned silence for a moment, processing what she had just heard. Then her training kicked in, and she began working with the focused intensity that had made her one of Earth's best communications officers. Within minutes, she had cleaned up the signal, verified its authenticity, and transmitted it directly to Admiral David Chen at Earth Defense Command. She also sent copies to the United Nations Space Council, the Terran Research Institute, and every major military installation in the Sol system. Alina knew that in the next few hours, the most important decision in human history would be made. Would Earth stand up to help alien civilizations that barely considered humanity equals? Would they risk their small, newly built fleet against an enemy that had destroyed powers far greater than themselves? As she watched Earth continue its slow rotation below, Alina thought about the strange reputation humanity had gained among the stars. Other species found humans fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. They couldn't understand how a single species could be simultaneously compassionate enough to rescue complete strangers and vicious enough to wage war against impossible odds. But Alina understood. She had grown up on a world where hurricanes, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions were regular occurrences, where predators hunted in packs and prey species survived through cunning and cooperation, where diseases constantly evolved to challenge the immune system, and where the very act of living required constant adaptation and struggle. Humanity hadn't just survived Earth's challenges, they had thrived because of them. Every human carried within them the genetic memory of ancestors who had faced down saber-toothed tigers, survived ice ages, and built civilizations despite floods, droughts, and plagues. They were the children of a world that had never given them an easy path, and in return, they had learned to find ways where others saw only impossibility. The communication board lit up with incoming signals from across the Sol system, Earth. Command was mobilizing, and Alina could feel the familiar sensation of humanity preparing for the impossible. She had felt it before during the colony ship disasters, the asteroid mining conflicts, and the first diplomatic tensions with alien races. It was the feeling of humans looking at a challenge everyone said couldn't be overcome and saying, "Watch us." As she prepared to coordinate the flood of military communications that would soon follow, Alina allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth's children were called Deathworlders. Not because they brought death, but because they refused to let death stop them from protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The Void Hunters had never faced an enemy from a world like Earth. They had never encountered a species that considered impossible odds to be just another Tuesday. They were about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous enemies were not the ones with the best technology or the largest fleets, but the ones who simply refused to give up. The gathering storm Admiral David Chen stood in the war room deep beneath the Himalayas, surrounded by holographic displays showing the current positions of every human vessel in known space. The room buzzed with activity as intelligence officers, tactical analysts, and communications specialists worked to understand the threat facing the galaxy. It had been 18 hours since Captain Rodriguez's transmission and Earth's response. was already taking shape. Status report, Admiral Chen commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 40 years in military service, rising through the ranks during humanity's expansion into space. Commander Sarah Thompson, Calson Ghost, looked up from her tactical display. She was one of Earth's most decorated pilots, known for her ability to make spacecraft do things that violated several laws of physics and common sense. Her black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, but her eyes held the predatory gleam of someone who genuinely enjoyed impossible missions. Admiral, we've confirmed the authenticity of the Zephyrian transmission, Commander Thompson reported. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive energy signatures moving through the Sagittarius arm. Whatever these void hunters are, they're real, and they're heading toward the galactic core. Dr. Marcus Webb, the chief xenobiologist for the Terran Research Institute, stepped forward with a tablet full of data. He was a thin man with wild grey hair who had spent the last 5 years studying every piece of alien technology humanity could get their hands on. His enthusiasm for xenobiology was matched only by his complete inability to understand why anyone would consider his research boring. Admiral, I've been analyzing the limited data we have on the Void Hunters, Dr. Webb said, his voice excited. Despite the grim circumstances, from what I can determine, they're a hive mind species that operates on principles completely different from any known galactic civilization. They don't just conquer territory, they consume it, breaking down matter at the molecular level and rebuilding it into more of themselves. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. He had seen the preliminary reports, and they painted a picture of an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. What about their adaptation capabilities? That's where it gets interesting, Dr. Webb continued, his eyes lighting up with scientific curiosity. The Zephyrians mentioned that the Void Hunters adapt to any weapon used against them. But I think there's a limitation we haven't considered. Their adaptation appears to be based on analyzing and countering known technologies and tactics. Commander Thompson leaned forward, immediately grasping the implications. You're saying they can adapt to things they've seen before, but not to something completely new. Exactly, Dr. Webb confirmed. Every major galactic civilization uses similar principles: energy weapons, gravitic manipulation, quantum field generators. Their military tactics are all based on thousands of years of established doctrine. The Void Hunters have probably encountered these technologies in some form during their previous incursions. Admiral Chen felt a familiar sensation, the same feeling he had experienced as a young officer facing overwhelming odds during the Martian colony crisis. It was the moment when an impossible situation suddenly revealed a tiny crack that could be exploited. But they've never encountered human technology or human tactics. Sir, interjected Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos from the Intelligence Division. We've been analyzing human military doctrine compared to standard galactic warfare principles. The differences are ... significant. She activated a holographic display showing tactical formations used by various alien species. The formations were elegant, mathematical, and followed logical patterns that minimized casualties while maximizing firepower efficiency. They were the product of civilizations that had evolved on peaceful worlds where conflict was rare and orderly. Now compare that to human tactics, Lieutenant Colonel Santos continued, switching to displays of human military formations. The patterns were chaotic, unpredictable, and seemed to deliberately embrace risk in ways that made the alien formations look timid by comparison. Human military doctrine is based on principles that most galactic civilizations consider insane. She explained, "We use decentralized command structures that allow individual units to make split-second decisions. We employ asymmetric warfare tactics that turn our weaknesses into advantages. We're willing to accept casualty rates that other species would consider unacceptable." Admiral Chen studied the displays, remembering his own military training. Human tactics had been shaped by millennia of warfare on a planet where survival required constant adaptation. They had learned to fight in environments ranging from Arctic tundra to scorching deserts, from dense jungles to urban mazes. They had developed strategies for fighting enemies that were larger, stronger, faster, or more numerous than themselves. "There's something else," Commander Thompson added, pulling up her own set of tactical analyses. "Human spacecraft design, philosophy, is completely different from alien ships. Most galactic vessels are built for efficiency and longevity. They're designed to avoid damage and preserve resources." She gestured to a holographic representation of a human destroyer, its angular hull bristling with weapons and reinforced with armor plating. "Human ships are built to take damage and keep fighting. We design them assuming they're going to be shot at, rammed, and pushed beyond their operational limits. Our entire fleet doctrine is based on the assumption that every engagement is going to be a fight to the death." Dr. Webb nodded enthusiastically. "It's the difference between prey species and predator species. Most galactic civilizations evolved from herbivorous or omnivorous species that developed intelligence as a survival mechanism. Humans evolved from pack hunters. Our approach to conflict is fundamentally different." Admiral Chen walked to the main display showing the current position of Earth's fleet. It wasn't impressive by galactic standards, only 300 vessels, most of them smaller than the massive dreadnoughts used by the major alien powers. But every ship had been designed and crewed by humans who understood that sometimes the only way to win was to be willing to lose everything. "Gentlemen, ladies," Admiral Chen announced, his voice carrying across the war room, "we're going to do something that every tactical manual in the galaxy says is impossible. We're going to take a small fleet of primitive ships and use them to defeat an enemy that has destroyed civilizations with technology centuries ahead of ours." He paused, looking around the room at the faces of Earth's finest military minds. These were people who had grown up hearing stories of impossible victories, from ancient battles where small forces had defeated massive armies to more recent conflicts where human ingenuity had overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. "The Zep are expecting us to fail," Admiral Chen continued. "The Void Hunters probably don't even consider us a threat. The entire galaxy sees humanity as newcomers who don't understand the realities of galactic warfare. They're all correct, and that's exactly why we're going to win." Commander Thompson smiled, the expression of someone who had just been handed the mission she had been training for her entire life. "What are your orders, Admiral?" "We're going to gather every available ship and head for the Kepler 442 system," Admiral Chen replied. "We're going to link up with what's left of the Zephyrian fleet. And then we're going to show the Void Hunters what happens when you threaten the pack." As the war room erupted into controlled chaos, with officers rushing to implement the Admiral's orders, Dr. Webb approached the command console with a thoughtful expression. "Admiral," he said quietly, "there's one more thing about the Void Hunters that might be important. Based on the energy signatures we've detected, I believe they operate as a true hive mind, with all units connected to a central intelligence." Admiral Chen turned to face the scientist. "What does that mean for our tactical options?" It means they're used to perfect coordination and instant communication, Dr. Webb explained. But it also means they might have trouble dealing with truly independent action. Human military units are trained to operate without central command if necessary. We can function as a cohesive force even when communication is cut off. The Admiral nodded, filing away another piece of the tactical puzzle. In the next few days, humanity would face its greatest challenge since leaving Earth. They would be outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting an enemy that had defeated forces far superior to their own. But as Admiral Chen watched his people prepare for the impossible, he felt a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with technology or tactics. Humanity had survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and wars that had lasted generations. They had learned to thrive in conditions that would kill most other species. The Void Hunters were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy wasn't the one with the biggest guns or the most advanced technology. Sometimes it was the one who simply refused to stay down, no matter how many times they were knocked to the ground. Earth's children were going to war, and the galaxy would never be the same.